Okay, we are live and we are continuing the Ship of Fools because I mean it would have been weird, because like one Saturday was Christmas, another Saturday was New Year's. It just seemed really inappropriate to talk about politics on a day where most people are celebrating.
Yeah. And I'm sorry once again that I couldn't make it Saturday. I didn't realize that you didn't know that we had to work around that scheduling issue. Um, but I'm happy to be here now. Um, so, where would you like to start us off on continuing to read Ship of Fools with while we screen share sections from the document, or would you prefer to have me do it?
I mean, you could share a screen share. When we last left off, we left off at oligarchs posting against democracies will always be overthrown at the end. So where we would be starting at would be that's the story of 2016. That would be uh,
Yeah,
continuing where we left off.
that's right. Okay, just a second. Let me
So
get the screen share up. Do you see what I see?
yeah, I have it up on the screen now. That's the way people could follow along instead of
Mm-hmm.
yeah, people can follow on and see for this for themselves instead of um, you know,
Yeah.
okay. That's the story of 2016. What's remarkable is how the ruling class responded. Donald Trump won the Republican primaries, and Republican leaders immediately began plotting to take his nomination at the convention. Trump won the general election, and the elite schemed to have the results nullified by electors. Trump assumed office, and the permanent class in Washington worked to sabotage his administration. I do think calling them the permanent class is really interesting, especially when you consider that Hillary Clinton is related to the Kennedys, especially since we always seem to have a Clinton or a Bush in the White House. Like George Bush Sr. was president, then George W. Bush Jr. was president. Then Jeb Bush started running. It does start to look like almost like an aristocracy.
Yeah, when you really think about it, Obama is the only president in recent memory to come from someone who isn't like a long, rich political family. And I guess the other would be Ronald Reagan.
Oh, Ronald Reagan. Like, oh yeah, he was a celebrity. Then he went from
Mm-hmm.
a celebrity to becoming a president. And when it comes to Donald Trump, it seems like people voted for him because that's their favorite celebrity. You know.
Yeah, I think that that whole aspect of a lot of American presidents are either now from like a political dynasty or they're celebrities is really interesting. And once again, if we're including celebrities in this, I can only really think of Obama as an exception.
Well, Obama isn't a well. I mean, it all depends because people did really like him. I guess you could say that nowadays people now worship politicians. Like you can see it with AOC, where people are like fans of her, where politicians are treated like celebrities.
Hmm. I think there is a certain amount of truth to that. You can see definitely, especially politicians that are more like millennial aged, you can definitely see how their brand is a little bit more influencer. You know, a lot of the ways AOC talks and acts would not be out of place, like for an Instagram model.
Yeah, yeah. AOC is closer to like an Instagram model. It's kind of like how she was dancing in the rooftops and whatnot. And I think there's another clip of her dancing like outside a door or something, like she was in the hallway dancing.
Hmm. Now, granted, I think that that aspect of AOC increases her popularity, but it's still an interesting phenomenon to note in terms of America's political system. What message do voters take from this? All your fears are real. You may have suspected our democracy was actually an oligarchy. Now you know for sure. You can vote all you want, but voting is a charade. Your leaders don't care what you think. Shut up and obey. This is interesting because I hear a lot of this anti like electoralism rhetoric from the left, where they think that voting is pointless and nothing ever changes. And now it's interesting to see that it's also somewhat a common perception on the right.
Well,
Um,
America is literally a plutocracy. Like there are numerous articles about America being a plutocracy, where like they noticed the trend that if the supermajority of regular Americans wants one thing, but rich people wants a different thing, then rich people would get what they want. Like kind of like how so many Americans wants that $15 minimum wage, but things kind of like went the way that a rich people would want to want,
yeah.
or how Build Back Better changed to benefit the upper class, or how Nancy Pelosi used it to give rich people tax cuts, and so Nancy Pelosi, who tries to present herself as to the left or whatnot, or at least
Mm-hmm.
during the Trump administration, she wanted to seem like really, really left, and the Democrats wanted to seem really much to the left during Donald Trump's presidency. But then it's kind of like once they're in the office, they scaled it back. Like we don't really want to do any of that.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I actually do agree with America being like an oligarchy. I still think voting has some value because it's usually better to do something than it is to not do anything. And I'm not necessarily sure like complete apathy about the political system really helps. But change the way America is. But I can understand why people are cynical about voting. It makes a lot of sense to when you see your ideas get betrayed time and time again by the people you're voting for, hoping that they'll achieve something, but they don't because they serve very different interests.
Well, I do think that the way Americans go about it is problematic because, mostly they just focus on the presidency when really they
Yeah.
should be focused on the House and the Senate, because
Yes.
it's kind of like the president at least has a term limit, but it's kind of like, people could be like in the house, or think about Pelosi. She's been
Hmm.
a representative for like forever.
I
You
think
know,
people like Pelosi and Mitch McConnell are actually more powerful than presidents.
exactly. I would say that Pelosi and McConnell are more powerful than presidents. Like, if you really want to see a difference, don't vote on the main election and call it a day, because the president's, in my view, the president is nothing more than a figurehead.
Hmm.
Because the House and the Senate could overrule the president.
I mean, we seem to see this constantly with Joe Biden. Like, supposedly, he's the most powerful man in the world, yet he constantly seems to be at the mercy of um, Joe Manchin, and it starts to make you wonder, okay, who's president here? You or Joe Manchin?
Yeah,
He's
the
constantly like, I can't do this because of Joe Manchin. I can't do that because of Joe Manchin. Like,
president.
you might as well just resign and allow yourself to be replaced by Joe Manchin.
Yeah, the president is just a figurehead. It's why I didn't really buy into all of that sensationalism of Donald Trump, mainly because the president is just a figurehead. Because you can see the rhetoric totally change when Biden was in office. Like the rhetoric changed. Like it goes from we need to get rid of Trump because he's all powerful. Then it's like, oh, Biden can't do this because of the
He has no
parliaments. This,
power.
yeah, it goes from the president being all powerful, then to Biden can't do anything because of the Senate's parliamentarian, or Biden can't do this, or Biden can't do that. It's just like, well,
Hmm.
which is it? Is the president's all powerful, or is it? And somebody took to notes that the exact same thing happened when Obama was president, where it's like Obama can't do this because of the Senate. Obama can't do that because, of the House. Obama was blocked on this. Obama was blocked on that. So it's like, to me, it would make more sense because like if I was Bill Gates, and if I wanted to bribe somebody, I wouldn't bribe the presidents. I would bribe people in the House of Representatives. Like I would bribe Nancy Pelosi. You know, if I were going to
Hmm.
bribe anybody, I would
And
bribe
that's probably
Nancy.
why Nancy Pelosi's net worth has grown so much over her years in office. Um, it's profitable to be a tool of the elites. Anyway, you don't have to support Trump to see this as a dangerous message. Democratic government is a pressure relief valve that keeps societies from exploding. In a democracy, frustrated citizens don't have to burn police stations or storm the Bastille. They can vote. Once they come to, we're going to need to switch sections here. Believe that voting is pointless, anything can happen. Wise leaders understand this. They're reflective and self critical. When they lose elections, they think about why.
I do think it is important to think about why you lost the election, but I think that part of it is like Donald Trump was a celebrity. Not only that, he was funny too. Like the primaries were entertaining, and I think he used humor,
Mm-hmm.
to get his way to the White House because, I think that a lot of young people voted for Donald Trump because, I mean, he was really, really funny, but it's like you don't vote somebody into the White House because they're funny. You don't vote somebody into the White House because they make you laugh. And there are people in political compass memes who did admit, like, okay, there were a few people who admitted that they voted for Donald Trump because Donald Trump made him laugh. They admitted it in political compass memes, and even
Mm-hmm.
Sargon was like, Donald Trump trolled his way into the White House.
Yeah, I think that is like if you do that, I think you're very really weird. Like why would you just vote for someone just because they make you laugh and not because you think it will benefit yourself or others?
Yeah, because Sargon of Akkad said Donald Trump trolled his way into the White House. He's one of us. He's a troll, just like yes, yay. And I'm quite sure that Sargon video is still up somewhere. And then like if you go to political compass moves, it's really old by now. But if it's still in the search engine, people are like, oh yeah, I voted for Donald Trump because he made me laugh, and I thought it would be funny. Because it's really the young people, the people who are like 18 years old, and it's like this is a really serious decision. It's kind of like it's a really serious decision. You can't vote for somebody because they made you laugh.
I agree. Um, and the other aspect of this is that I agree that when you lose elections, you should be reflective, which is why I think it's interesting that conservatives have gone from, oh, yeah, Democrats reflect on why you lost in 2016 to, no, no, we never lost in 2020. Don't you dare say we lost in 2020. It's fake. It's a lie. Biden stole the election. Um, like that is just a complete and blaring hypocrisy that they are doing. Like, yeah, you're right. Russia didn't hack the election. Trump won fair and square, even if he didn't win the popular vote in 2016. But he lost in 2020. Now you need to be the ones doing the self reflection and realize why he lost and make changes aside from, oh, it's because people we don't like voted.
Yeah, and also, I mean, but okay, Georgia is normally a red state, but for the first time, Georgia, flipped blue. So it's kind of like if something, if Georgia is normally red, but it flipped a blue for Biden, you really got to think about why it flipped a blue.
Mm-hmm. And the same thing with Arizona. That's usually a very red state, but it also went blue. And instead of being like, maybe we need to tone back on the anti-immigrant stuff and, just focus on areas that we can improve immigration that most Americans like agree with, like e-verify or some sort of language requirement, like you said. Instead of doing that, the Republicans have gone on this insane tangent where they're like, oh, Biden stole the election, millions of illegals voted. And we won't take any personal responsibility for this loss. And in fact, we're going to try to overthrow the government.
Yeah, not only that, but it's kind of like I don't know that once they try to have like racist voting laws, like on the surface level, it's like we're just gonna, require voter ID. But if you like looked into the details, they were
Hmm.
targeting black people. It's like Social Equalizer sent me an NPR article where it's kind of like, on a surface level, it just says, oh, voter ID, and it's like, oh, well, everybody has a driver's license, but it's like if you read an article about the details, it's like it's a lot more. It was getting a lot stricter to the point that it really was targeting black people. Maybe yeah, maybe like later on I could just show people the article what I'm talking about.
Yeah, sounds like a plan. And I agree as well. Like I remember watching this interview. Actually, you know what? This kind of sounds like a good idea for a follow up stream. Um, but as I was saying, I remember this interview with a black Republican, and he was being interviewed about new and even more draconian voter ID laws and voter suppression in some deep red states. And he was basically going on, I like Republican policies. I want to vote Republican, but I can when I see stuff like this, I understand why a lot of black people have a hard time doing it. And I think that sometimes I wonder if the Republicans are really shooting themselves in the foot because I think that there are, a lot of black people who are staunch believers in, Christianity. There's a lot of black people that, might have, want crime to be resolved. There is a potential for support that the Republicans could get. And they used to have when they were, more along the lines of the party of Lincoln, and they actually did support anti-lynching laws and stuff like that. But nowadays, the Republican Party has so sold out to racism so hard
Oh
that,
my God. Yeah, because I was just thinking, me and Social Equalizer talk about that very frequently. Because Black people are actually very conservative. One thing that I would agree with Larry Elder, like when Larry Elder was in the Rubin Report, is that Black
mhm,
people actually are very conservative, more conservative than white people. But then when you have racist voting laws, because again, on the surface level, it's like I have a driver's license. How do you think I get alcohol? But then it's kind of like when you look deeper into it, like maybe I should show the NPR article right now. It's just NPR.
if you want, yeah.
Yes, really quickly. Um, just so if people ever were to watch it, people would just see what I'm talking about instead of thinking I'm being melodramatic. I'm quite sure the left wouldn't think that way, but there are right wingers that watch me too, so it's kind of like
Yeah.
Supreme Court declines Republican bid to revive Carolina voter ID laws. And let's just skip down. um the fights began in 2013 when the states made cuts to early voting, created a photo ID requirement, and eliminated same day registrations, out to president's voting, and pre registration of high school students. More than half of all voters that use early voting and African Americans do so at higher rates than whites. African Americans also tend to overwhelmingly vote Democrats. So you see,
Hmm.
it's supposed to be an anti-immigration to try to stop immigrants from voting, but even though it's meant to stop immigrants from voting, it actually targets. Okay, down here it targets African Americans with almost surgical precision.
Yeah, I think that this like laws like that, it's kind of a two birds with one stone deal for Republicans. Like they get the benefit of, you know, targeting immigrants, and they also get the benefit of, targeting black people. So the Democrats have less voters from two of their things that tend to support them most.
But again, I think that Republicans are shooting themselves in the foot because Black people are more, from my experience, Black people are more conservative than white people. However, whenever I talk to Black people and why Black people are against voting Republican, they're like, because they're racist. It's like,
Hmm.
it's like they're racist. They want to hurt Black people. So it's kind of like you're kind of alienating potential voters instead of trying to get people to vote for you in an ethical way. It's like, oh, we just don't want you to vote.
And this, I mean, I think it definitely does backfire. Like I remember the polling numbers for what was her name in Georgia who ran for the governor against Brian Kemp. Um,
I don't know.
I'm gonna see if I can remember, if I can track it down. Sorry. Let's see. Georgia gubernatorial election 2018. And it was Brian Kemp, I remember. Stacey Abrams. Yes. So after Brian Kemp instituted a lot of like voter suppression sort of laws and purged a bunch of people from the voter rolls, um, that actually increased Stacey Abrams' polling numbers, and she got a really good result for Georgia. Um, Although she didn't end up winning in the end. So I don't know. I think that these sorts of strategies for the Republicans, I don't know if they'll ever realize that they're, you know, hurting them. If they were clever, they would. But I think they might be a bit too wedded to the idea of we've got to stop certain people from voting. You know?
Also, I read something, and I think it's helpful. I think that it is helpful, but it's like young Republicans, are more progressive than traditional Republicans. Like
Hmm.
Republican Zoomers thinks think that there is too much racism against Black people.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how where the Republican Party goes in terms of that direction. Will they, you know, um, stick true to those values, or will they end up more going along the lines of Trump and some of the more extreme supporters? Anyway, speaking of more extreme supporters, back to Tucker Carlson. Um,
Where
maybe,
maybe Yeah, maybe America's most effective government agency is the National Transportation Safety Board, which investigates plane crashes. Anytime a commercial aircraft goes down, the NTSB combs the sites of the crash, trying to reverse engineer what's happened. Its investigators figure out what's went wrong in order to prevent it from happening again. The NTSB is so good at its job that since 2009 there hasn't been a single fatal accident involving a domestic air carrier. Do you want to read the next paragraph?
sure. If our political and intellectual elites ran the NTSB, they'd respond to plane crashes by blaming Vladimir Putin. They'd claim the aircraft was piloted by racists or had too many white men on board.
Oh, wait a minute. I highlighted it. Wait a minute. They would claim that the pilot was racist, but Tucker Carlson really is racist, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tucker Carlson really is racist, and it had too many white people. Wait a minute, wait a minute. I know why I highlighted it. I remember why I highlighted it. Like, had too many white people on board because I do remember like paragraphs earlier, like sometime earlier. He basically repeated the Great Replacements. You
Yeah.
know, so because like I color code things, and blue is things that I find funny. Like each time I use a blue highlighter, it's something I consider funny. So
Hmm.
it's kind of like, wait a minute, so it's kind of like, had too many white men on board. I highlighted blue because I thought it was funny, and and I did
Hmm.
watch the rewatch the live stream, at least the any part, and we did talk about how Tucker Carlson repeated the Great Replacement scene,
Yeah.
complaining about too many brown people being in the country.
Yeah. And now I think that this is his more subtle way of thinking it, like through humor, he's trying to reinforce the idea that yes, the people who control this country, who we're not going to mention, but those guys that control the country, they hate that there are white men, that there are too many white men, and they want less of them. You know, it's rather subtle, but it's reinforcing the victim sort of rhetoric that he's been establishing earlier in this prologue. It's
Yeah,
humor.
the right swinger is just social justice for white men.
Yeah, I think Steve Bannon did that intentionally. He said that his goal was to create a political ideology that was intersectionality for white men.
Yeah. If you dare point out a mechanical malfunction, they will accuse you of bigotry against parts manufacturers and then ban quality control for good measure. After a while, you stop flying. It'd be too dangerous, but our leaders wouldn't notice. They'd feel satisfied and virtuous, and in any case, they fly privates anyway. Their planes are safe. The
This
aftermath of the 2016 election is
I kind of
recognizable.
wanted to talk about that paragraph.
Mm,
There's something that's interesting there. One is Tucker Carlson talking like a leftist again when he's like, "Oh, they fly private anyway. You know, they're not in the same category as you." That's a bit more of some of that, class conscious rhetoric popping up again. But the other interesting thing is the political elites do run this. The National Transport Safety Board is a government agency. We know what it would look like if the elites ran that agency because they already do.
mm. So yeah, this is right wing populism because it reminds me of, and I'm not going to say its name. I'm just going to use the translation. My struggle by, and I'm just going to use, I'm going to use the euphemism Alfred Hitchcock. I don't mean Alfred Hitchcock, but
We could say an
right.
aspiring Austrian painter.
Yeah, because it's kind of like because I didn't read the whole thing because I got creeped out. I don't remember which I remember something about him saying plucking the weeds out or killing the weeds or something, but I got what he was getting at. Like he was talking about destroying the weeds or killing the weeds. And it's like, hey, I know what you're actually saying. And I got like really disturbed. After disturbed, it's like, okay. Because I got really scared and disturbed because, he also didn't like black people either. So it's like, okay, like you don't even like black people either. And it's kind of like I'm quite sure that if any of us lived over there, we would also be, eliminated. So I just got creeped out. But like Alfred Hitchcock, wink, wink. Some parts he would sound like a leftist. He would sound like really, really to the left. And then you
Mm-hmm.
get to the really creepy, eerie parts, some weeds need to be eliminated. Like some things like needs to be eliminated for the betterments of our people. It's like, okay, this is creepy, disturbing, and you
Mm-hmm.
sound like a sociopath. And like when I read his writing, he sounds like a sociopath. Like he gets pleasure out of harming people. Like he seems to actually love the idea of, harming other people. It's like you actually love the idea of causing harm to others. It's
Yeah.
creepy, it's eerie, it's disturbing. How could anybody read this without feeling, disturbed or creeped out by it?
Or just extremely uncomfortable. All right, would you like to continue?
Oh, what was okay? The aftermath of 2016 election is recognizable to any parent who has argued with a child. Everything's fine until the kid loses interest in what you think. Once it becomes clear the child doesn't really care about your stupid rules, you lose it and start screaming. The less control you have, the more hysterical you become.
Kind of telling on himself and his parenting techniques there.
I forgot why I highlighted that because I highlighted it so long ago. Um, Dying regimes are the same way. They get more repressive as they fade. As their power ebbs, rulers lash shots against this dissent and disobedience. Disposed Romanian dictator Nikolai. Can you pronounce that?
Nicolae Ceausescu.
Barked orders at his guards as they led him to the firing squad. Our leaders understood Trump's election as a direct challenge to their power. They've been fretting about his authoritarian tendencies ever since. Well, what's a bit authoritarian? Like I noticed that didn't he do something with what's that country? No, I think it's a U.S. territory, Puerto Rico. Didn't he
Mm-hmm.
remove the U.S. military from Puerto Rico? I think so.
I'll check. I don't remember.
I think he removed the U.S. military from Puerto Rico and said, "Hey, they need U.S. military protection because Puerto Rico is still a U.S. territory." You know, because they lack self awareness and don't perceive this as protection. They can't see that they actually are talking about themselves. Let's say you were an authoritarian who sought to weaken American democracy. Well, Puerto Ricans are American too, and Donald Trump did target them, like by removing the U.S. military from Puerto Rico. So it's like, Donald Trump has weakened American democracy because Puerto Ricans are Americans.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, despite what some people may think they are. Okay, now let's go. Let's say you were an authoritarian who sought to weaken American democracy. How would you go about doing that? You'd probably start by trying to control what people say and think. If citizens dissented from the mandated orthodoxy or dared to consider unorthodox ideas, you'd. Now let's get back to the Twitter. Exit out of this. Go down to this one. You'd hurt them, you'd shame them on social media, you'd shout them down in public, you'd get them fired from your jobs, you'd make sure everyone was afraid to disagree with you. You sort of mean like how professors get fired for being like pro-Palestinian, or people get fired for, all these curriculums against teaching critical race theory, or about how Republicans are defunding schools that have mask mandates. You know, I think that this sort of stuff is interesting because I think that pretty much everyone on every side of the political spectrum is okay with a certain amount of censorship as long as it targets the people they don't like. It's only a very rare few principled people, I think, that are just against censorship. And of course,
Yeah,
there is a
the people
difference.
who are against censorship all around.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying the people that are against censorship all around.
Mm-hmm. Uh, After that, you'd work to disarm the population. You'd take their guns away. That way, they'd be entirely dependent on you for safety, not to mention unable to resist your plans for them. The interesting thing about that one is Trump passed more gun control than Obama. So, once again, that's another area where Trump is being more along the lines of an authoritarian, as Tucker Carlson is describing.
Wait a minute, Trump was stricter on guns than Obama.
Yeah, he passed a few gun control bills, I think. There was one that made it. One it was where he restored Obama's only gun control bill that he ever passed, which was the one that prevented people who had a history of mental illness from buying guns. He initially removed that and then restored it. And then I think he made DIY semi automatics illegal and 3D printed guns.
Oh, do you have articles on that?
Sure, I'll see what I can find.
I'll continue reading. Let's see. That way, they would be entirely dependent on you for safety, not submission, unable to resist their opinions for them. Then, just to make sure you quell all opposition, you'd systematically target any institution that might oppose or puts brakes on your power. You'd be especially concerned about churches, the family. I don't think that the left care. I mean, I don't think that the left is targeting the family. I
Yeah,
don't think.
I don't understand why like people are like, "Oh, the left targets churches and the family." I mean, I haven't seen one bill from the Democrats that are like the anti-family act or the anti-church act. Like that would
What's
be
like? I don't know. I don't know any leftists against the family. I mean, it's kind of like many people want them. Like even on the left, many people wants a family. And independent businesses, you'd be sure to undermine and crush those using laws and relentless propaganda. Actually, when it comes to, okay, Yank might be a centrist, but even though Yank might be a centrist, I do know that he wanted to give, like, he wanted something for small businesses. He wanted to give them help, use, taxpayers' dollars to have fund small businesses or something. But the right wingers were against it. Funny enough, So when Yang was like, "Okay, I want to help small businesses, and let's use the taxpayer money to help them grow or whatnot, like help them out," and right wingers was like, "No, no, no, we don't want that." So it's like, um,
There we go. I remember he banned bump stocks. That was one of the big gun control things that Obama did. Sorry, not Obama, Trump did. I found this article. I'll send it to you on Twitter. Or I suppose I could share the screen now. Um, 3D printed guns.
uh, and independent businesses, you'd be sure to undermine and crush those using laws and relentless propaganda. If, despite all this, election results still didn't go your way, you'd use an unelected bureaucracy to nurture any leader you haven't handpicked yourself. What is that? I wonder if he's talking about Twitter. But you'd be shaken by an election like that. You'd resolve never to allow one again, to make sure that you'd work tirelessly to replace the old and ungrateful population with a new, more. Oh, this is
Oh, there's where we
replacement,
get the
the great
insidious racist
replacement
stuff.
again.
Yeah.
That is what you like to do. Like, man, he keeps referencing the great replacement.
Mm-hmm. And the whole like, oh yeah, Trump is so pro independent business. I don't know. I'm pretty sure Trump still kept up most of the like welfare, corporate welfare that the previous administrations had. Probably even increased it, but I don't have statistics on that one. I definitely know for a fact that he passed some gun control. Um and the stuff about social media, I mean, Trump definitely tried to use like social media to intimidate his opponents, and I do actually remember earlier on I was saying all of those laws the Republicans were passing in terms of and actions they were taking in terms of censorship of their political opponents over things like supporting Palestine or supporting education and history and racial justice. But anyway,
Man, when it comes to, like, when I think about Trump and social media, I mostly think about all of the cringe-worthy things he said on Twitter. Like on Twitter, he was so cringe. It's like he kept just saying stupid things, moronic things over and over again.
mm-hmm.
I thought that he was like, I think, like he was like one of the biggest idiots. Oh, like a narcissistic moron.
Yeah, it wasn't really very pleasant seeing that on the timeline every day.
Yeah, and people
Let's put
like
it that
in
way.
the media always wanted to cover everything he said, like each and every
I know.
bone of
I can't
bone.
decide what was worse. Trump's tweets or the fact that everyone had to shove your Trump's tweets in your face all the time. Be like, look at what Trump said this
I
time. Look at what
know.
Trump said that time. I'm like, I don't care.
I don't
Leave me
care.
alone.
Yeah, I was so tired of like the mainstream media, like CNN, freaking like Trump said this, Trump said that. Like I don't care. He's some moron. And not like that, but it's like when it comes to Biden, I don't even think he's that much better. I think he might be like a slight improvement, but it's like a
Yeah.
slight improvement.
I think we can do so much better than Biden, and I'm really hoping that he doesn't run for a second term because if he does, he'll get absolutely trounced because he's done a pretty mediocre job. Even mediocre is maybe a little bit too generous. He's just straight up less bad, but the degree to which he is less bad was kind of worse than even my low expectations already.
Yeah, he's not so that good. Like, Build Back Better. It gives so much tax cuts for the rich, and I'm quite sure that I read somewhere that it would actually be a burden on the middle class or whatnot.
Build back better, more like tax much lesser.
Yeah. Let's see where. Okay, sounds familiar. For all of his many faults, Donald Trump isn't doing any of that. Our ruling classes. I mean, well, wouldn't Trump be counts as the ruling class?
Yeah,
He's
he's literally
rich.
a multi-billionaire. Like, come on, Tucker. Like you
Yeah,
you can't pretend that Donald Trump isn't ruling class because you like him. Like,
yeah. Let's see. It's probably a fruitless exercise on their parts. The status quo is over. A revolution is on it. Well, I wouldn't call it a revolution. I
I mean,
mean,
if you want to think about that sad exercise at January 6th, where all the cringy white people painted their faces and um, danced around the Capitol building for a few hours.
I believe that the left wants a revolution more than the right does, to be honest.
Yeah, I feel like what the right seems to want is not so much a revolution as a civil war. You hear like people like Tim Pool are like, "Oh, there's going to be a civil war. There's going to be a civil war." And I hear that sort of rhetoric a lot more from the right, but the left I think is a little bit more on the line of, yeah, we need a revolution. And
Yeah, the left, like if you ever go to like our complete anarchy, I think it's called our complete
mhm.
anarchy. The
Yeah.
left seems to want a revolution far more than the right does. But if you go to like our and compare our complete anarchy to our anarcho capitalism, and what our anarcho capitalism does is just make fun of the left all the time. It's like, oh, let's just make fun of the left. Let's just make fun of the liberals. But our complete anarchy, they really want some actual changes.
Mm.
Hopefully, it'll be the kind of low grade revolution where everybody learns something and nobody gets hurt.
I've
But
never heard
it's,
of that kind of
yeah,
revolution.
I know. I was thinking the exact same thing. Even Culture Point made a video on that, like where Contra was like, we shouldn't be so eager for a revolution because people tend to die during revolutions.
And they do. Like, I mean, even I align myself sometimes in a revolutionary camp depending on the situation, but like I'm not like, oh yeah, a revolution. I can't wait for a lot of people to die. Like there's no such thing as a revolution where a bunch of people just show up and they're like, okay, we've all learned something now.
Yeah, I know, right? But it will be wrenching either. Wait a minute, wrenching either way because revolutions always are. This used to be a placid country. It's not anymore, and won't be for a while. What's wrong? The disaster began when almost everyone in power joined the same team. Well, I do think that the left and the right are in cahoots with each other. Like I do think that neocons and neoliberals are pretty
Yeah.
much the same thing.
Yeah, the establishment mostly wants itself to win. It doesn't really care if the establishment is red or the establishment is blue. It wants one of its own.
Yeah, because
Um,
it's kind of like it's always a Hillary or a Bush, like George Bush Senior, George Bush Junior, Jeb
mhm.
Bush. It's kind of like and it's like the media was actually harsher on Trump than it was on Bush.
And there was a lot to criticize Bush for. Honestly, he was probably a worse president, at least in terms of what he did, because honestly, I feel like he accomplished more, at least more bad things.
Oh yeah, because at least Trump got stopped and criticized. Like at least one good thing about the Trump presidency is that he was frequently criticized, which I
Mhm.
wish I see with the Biden presidency.
Instead,
But
it's like, oh no, we can't blame Biden for it because he has no power and he's actually just a little helpless baby who can't do anything despite being president.
Yeah, like I wish the media was harder on Biden, but but it's kind of like the media, like the moment Biden's president, it's just like it's like, oh, we can't really criticize him, even though like you hear racist things coming out of his mouth.
Yeah, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black.
Yeah, or it's like black people can't use a laptop, or black people don't know how to use a computer. And then you see like a person make a TikTok video where he acts like a monkey because it's like, oh yeah, like I don't know how to use the computer. It's like, most young people, sure, if you look at the older generation, like a baby boomer, even though my mom is a baby boomer and she knows how to use the computer. So it's like, okay, my mom, who literally is a baby boomer, is like addicted to the internet. Most people know
Hmm.
how to use one.
All right. So you used to hear debates between Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives on issues that matter to the rest of the country. That's over. Our public debates are mostly symbolic. They are sideshows designed to divert attention from the fact that those who make the essential decisions about the economy, the government, and the war have reached consensus on the fundamentals. They agree with each other. They just don't agree with the population they govern. This one's interesting because I feel like Republicans and Democrats do disagree on some things, but they also, like the establishment, does agree on a lot. So I sort of agree with that point. And next he says, this is the very last part. Left and right are no longer meaningful categories in America.
I would agree with that. I actually
Yeah,
would agree that the left and the right. Not only that, especially on Twitter. Like, if you go on Twitter, what is left? Do you mean you are a communist? Do you mean that you are a socialist? Do you mean that you are what's it, a suck them? Like,
yeah,
it's like, not only that, but liberals call themselves left. They see that
yeah,
they're to the left. Like, Bill Maher would be like, I am to the left. Bill Maher, like, I'm to the left. And it's like, well, your neoliberalism is right swing in most countries, you know.
yeah. Left and
So,
right, yeah. The rift is between those who benefit from the status quo and those who don't. And I actually do agree with you too, Rin, as well. Like, I think left versus right were never terribly meaningful distinctions, and they mean even less now. I more so care about, do you support the policies that I want to be implemented in the country to improve the living standards of, working people? Are you going to fight against political corruption? Or are you going to sell out and just plaster some nice logos on it and make me think that everything's, or try to make me think that everything's okay when it
yeah,
clearly
because
isn't?
the problem with it, even with like left is best, there are people who are communist, but they're communist and they're homophobic at the same time. So it's like
Yeah,
they're, huh? What did you say?
I said yeah. I was
Yeah,
agreeing with you.
because I do remember a big Twitter conflict, where you have to like a homophobic communist, and it is kind
Hmm.
of like you have like people who are communists who are LGBT, and they feel anxiety and stress. It's like, wait a
Hmm.
minute, I'm a communist, but you have all of these other communists that want to see me killed.
Hmm. It is frustrating. I think it would be like really like if you try to go to such an extreme group and then all of a sudden like even there you're excluded. It must have been a very frustrating feeling for them.
Yeah, it read between those who benefit from the status quo and those who don't. I agree with this actually because you do see ANCAPs who are like, I also want to change the status quo,
Hmm.
you know.
That's
Um,
rarely acknowledged in public, which is convenient for those who are benefiting. The people in charge are free to pursue policies that are disconnected from the public good, but that have, not coincidentally, made them richer, more powerful, and much more self satisfied.
I do agree with that, though. I do agree
Yeah.
with that statement, though.
Hmm. The thing is, like he's making very general statements, so we can't necessarily target which policies he's talking about in particular. Um, but not more impressive. Our leaders are fools, unaware that they are captains of a sinking ship. This is a book about them. Those last two lines are so telling. Once again, we're going back to Plato's analogy of the ship of fools, which as I said, was interesting because Plato basically believed that the best possible world was one that is governed by like a technocrat, a highly educated elite. Um, and that there is a natural order to the world where those who are better educated should govern, and those that are, more suited for something more menial should obey. And I think that's interesting because it's so exactly the opposite of right populism, um, that I don't know why he would use it as a metaphor. But the other interesting thing is, this is a book about them. I find that really interesting because it it shows Tucker Carlson's hand if you're paying attention. This isn't a book about the underprivileged. It isn't about a book about their wants and needs. It's a book about the elites. It's a book about the other. It's a book trying to create an us versus them. This is a book about them.
Are you talking about Jewish people?
Maybe through in probably some coded language, maybe. But more so, it's Tucker Carlson trying to to craft his enemy. You know, this is going to be a book about what you should hate, what you should fear, what you should join in the pretend placid revolution where people just go together and learn something. Um, this is who you need to fear and target. It's interesting. Like them. I don't know if I think Tucker Carlson is anti Semitic. We'll maybe see more evidence of that if we read more of the book together.
Well, the thing is, like, I did read the first chapter, but he's too much like Lawrence Southern. They're really identical because I mean I would say that he is well spoken and it is perfectly crafted because it's kind of like if you responded like to the first if you responded in real time, it is easy to make a fool of yourself because he talks about his cringy, what he does is like he first talks about his cringy like liberal teacher, like I think his liberal teacher was like Mrs. Raymond, and he goes on about things that people really love, like making a god aside, and it's like, and you think, oh my god, you're so cringe. All kids love making god size, and it's like, oh yeah, he had a recycle, but then he does like a switcheroo, and like, but she was a real liberal, like so he goes from talking bad about her, then he does a switcheroo and like, but she was a real liberal. She was authentic. She meant it. And that's what we're missing. We're missing real liberals. We got fake liberals. So it's like, oh, so it's kind of like he baits you. That was total bait.
Yeah. Tucker Carlson is a very, very clever writer. And if I hadn't been talking about this with someone as intelligent with you, I think it would be easy to, have someone else fall into a lot of these traps. This you have to be really paying attention for what he's doing here.
Yeah, because he is clever. Like Lawrence Sutter, he's really clever, and everything he says is so perfectly crafted. Like he could really get into like fiction. Like I would think that if he went down a different road and went down to a road of writing fiction, I could see myself getting into his work because everything is so well written. It's so
Mhm.
charismatic. It has a nice flow to it, so it's kind of like, oh, what's going to go like, okay, the first chapter, but he, like Lawrence Southern, he's really sneaky, manipulative, and clever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when somebody is sneaky, manipulative, and clever, you could kind of see like why Vadim Newquist took his time and was really, really careful about dealing with Lawrence Southern because she is YouTube doesn't like it when people swear, so she's a BS artist.
Mm. Okay, Ren. Thank you for the stream. This was a rather short one because we only had to finish the tail end of Tucker Carlson, but I had a lot of fun here today. Thank you, and I guess thank you to everyone who was watching. And let me know, Ren, if you have any more ideas for streams to do. You know my hours, and It's always great talking with you.
Well, for me, I just got off work early today. Like, I don't know why, but I think it's because we're supposed to work on Saturday. That's what I
Maybe.
heard. I heard that we had to work on Saturday, so they let us out really early. Like, I'm not actually supposed to get off until 3 o'clock. Well, 3:30.
Well, I'm glad because that probably gives you a lot more time to enjoy the day before your rest and you wake up for tomorrow.
Yeah, because I get up really early. Like part of it is to like find a good parking space. Like
Hmm.
because like the later you arrive at work, the worse the parking space. So the earlier you arrive at work, the better the parking space. Though it's never ever too bad. I like the layouts of this shop more because I don't have to like it's like less walking. You know.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's like like do get up bright and early. Not only that, but it's getting cold outside, so it's like part of it's getting out, just like defrosting the windshield.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing, I did have books on other things like where I was reading the Crusades, and I learned that Christians invented the very first hospital. And it's like, wow, I had no idea that Christians invented the very first hospital.
Hmm.
Yeah. But I normally just find interesting articles to read because tackling a book is like, especially with Tucker Carlson, it's just he's really manipulative.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And those are the most dangerous kind of people of all. All right, Rin, thank you so much for having me on your stream. As always, it's a pleasure being a friend with someone like you.
You're welcome. Is did anybody? Nobody is in show right now. I guess it's because everybody's so worked out right now. Anyway, thank you for joining. Bye, everybody.
Bye.